Opera and metal. A good thing? A bad thing? A golden example of what happens when two musical elements that are epic by nature clash? Or a steaming pile of junk that nobody should ever even consider listening to? Well, that's what we're here to flesh out. It's time for another metal review, and today we're going to take a look at Therion's new 3-album, 3-hour metal opera, Beloved Antichrist. Now, this was a roller coaster of an album. The high points on the album were incredibly high, like way up there. But the low points on the album were insanely low, like lower than low. There were brilliant points to this album, and there were points that made me scratch my head and just go, what? Now, the first thing that I'm going to talk about today is the album's runtime, which everybody who's watching this is probably wondering, what does he think of the 3-hour runtime? 3 hours, 46 tracks. To me, that's overkill. I don't care how good an album is. I don't care how bad an album is. I don't care how epic you're going for. If the album runs for more than 45 minutes or an hour, people get winded. Shoot, it took me this entire weekend just to get through this monstrosity of an album. A CD is kind of like a speech. If it's too short, then people aren't interested. If it's too long, then people become listless and bored, and they begin to fall asleep. Beloved Antichrist suffers from the latter of that analogy. It's so long that the songs start to basically run together. The orchestral element of the album, which is one of the album's focal points, begins to feel very overused. Another big problem that I had with this album was actually the lack of metal. Now, don't get me wrong, I love orchestral stuff, and I love it even more when metallic elements are infused into it, something like Xandria or Nightwish, but it just doesn't work here. You go from a great headbanging track like Temple of New Jerusalem, to a mid-range track like Dagger of God, to a track like Seeds of Time, where there really aren't any metallic elements to speak of. Now, if there is one thing I must say in praise of this album, it's that when the songs work, they really work. Temple of New Jerusalem, Through Dust Through Rain, and Hail Caesar are excellent examples of what can be done when operatic and metallic elements are combined. When the melodies and orchestra come together to form something beautiful, it really is beautiful. Another thing that I have to praise the album for is the sheer amount of work that's been put into it. Now note, I said work, not effort. If any effort had been put in, then every song would be as good as the 3 I just mentioned. However, to coordinate and to put together a 3-hour album with 30 different vocalists and just all this orchestral stuff, having to get it all together, make sure everything's tracked right and produced and mixed and all that, I gotta give him props. You know, it's gotta be difficult to do that. It's just such a shame that the album is so long and it attempts to be very epic, but it comes across as not being enjoyable. Now, Therion is a band that I had only heard maybe a song or two by before I sat down and listened to this full album all the way through. And I must say that I probably won't be checking out anything else that they've done. However, if it's anything like the beginning or the middle of the first album of the 3, then I might be willing to reconsider. The first disc was definitely more enjoyable than the last 2. However, as I said with Tribulation, a few songs alone do not a good album make, and this is a prime example. It's disappointing, seeing as how I am a huge symphonic metal fan, but, you know, it is what it is. No album of the year for Therion this year. I give Beloved Antichrist a 70 out of 100 on the yearly perfection scale. Thanks for watching. Click like, leave a comment, subscribe. Let me know what you thought of Therion's new album, and if you would recommend anything else by this band. I'll see you next week with another review. Next week, we're going to veer away from heavy metal a little bit because there's a hard rock album coming out that I'm really excited about. Next week, I'll be reviewing Pop Evil's new self-titled album.